In on the Brett Kavanaugh hearings. Here's part of what she said.
Brett Kavanaugh said that the, quote, political hit job, end quote, directed at him was being done on behalf of the Clintons, among other people. Your response?
Oh, that laugh. It haunts your dreams. We'll have more on that and what it means, because it is revealing, later in the show. Also, a new investigation reveals who exactly is funding many of the protesters you've seen scream at Republicans in public. You probably won't be surprised, but we have confirmation tonight. First, though, when the Senate decided to delay Brett Kavanaugh's confirmation vote for a week in order to enable an FBI investigation, everyone who was not Jeff Flake understood the point of it. The investigation itself was irrelevant. For Democrats, the only purpose was to buy time so that new people, some of them anonymously, could make allegations against Kavanaugh. That's exactly what happened, of course, and we've been the first to scoff at some of these claims because some have been frivolous, unfounded, some have been absurd. But tonight we must tell you a new and troubling story has emerged that could alter the trajectory, not simply of the Kavanaugh nomination, but of the history of this country. It is a story of a young man, outwardly respectable, but so morally distorted within, so addled by chronic dependency on draft beer, that witnesses say he committed a particularly heinous form of assault in a public place. This man, this monster in human form, once tossed an ice cube at someone in a bar. Yes, an ice cube. The perfect weapon. In solid form, deadly. And then within hours, it melts and evaporates into the air. All physical evidence turns to vapor. There are no fingerprints. It's diabolical, the perfect crime. And frankly, from a constitutional standpoint, it is disqualifying. Now, we'll concede that we miss the significance of this story at first, but the other networks were on it long before we were. Watch their coverage.
Police documents that show that Brett Kavanaugh threw ice in someone's face,
Accused him of throwing ice.
Accused Kavanaugh of throwing ice on him.
The nominee threw ice on him.
Accused him of throwing ice on him for, quote, some unknown reason.
Icegate. Well, the founders, the framers of our Constitution, anticipated this very moment. Article 3 of the Constitution, in words well known to every first-year law student, are unequivocal on this subject. Quote, whoever shall throw ice in a tavern is disqualified from service in the federal judiciary. End quote. Game over. And yet, ladies and gentlemen, there is more tonight. A former Yale student called Tad Lowe, who apparently overlapped with Brett Kavanaugh in school, has contacted the FBI with a brand new outrage. Lowe says that at one time at a frat party, some fraternity brothers hired a prostitute to put on some kind of show that Lowe found offensive. Now, what does this have to do with Brett Kavanaugh, you might wonder? Well, as Lowe concedes, nothing directly. Quote, I can't say for certain that Judge Kavanaugh was present in the frat house. And yet, and this is the critical part of this story, Brett Kavanaugh may have been in the state of Connecticut when this happened. The very same state at the very same time that people in a fraternity house were doing things that Ted Lowe didn't like. Need we say more? Totally and utterly disqualifying. Still confused? Watch CNN. They'll explain. There have been a lot of stories like this lately, you may have noticed. Julie Swetnick, for example, claims that 37 years ago, for some reason, she went to 10 gang rape parties in a row in suburban Maryland, and that Brett Kavanaugh may have been at some of them. What did Brett Kavanaugh do at these parties? Well, Swetnick signed a sworn statement suggesting that Kavanaugh and friends added drugs and alcohol to the punch that facilitated the rapes that took place at these parties. Now, that's a very serious charge, except as Swetnick just explained in a televised interview, she didn't really mean it.
I saw him around the punch, I won't say bowls or the punch containers. I don't know what he did, but I saw him buy them, yes.
Well, you've heard Democrats talk a lot recently about how Brett Kavanaugh may have lied under oath. There's no evidence for that. There is now, though, quite a bit of evidence that Julie Swetnick just did. Democrats don't care. They're not interested in finding out because, hey, whatever works. Power is the point. And yet they should care. Sexual assault is a horrifying crime, no matter who commits it. All decent people understand that. False claims trivialize the offense, and there have been a number of widely publicized false claims over the past 15 years. And they undermine the many assault victims who are telling the truth. They make the search for justice seem political, which it never should be. And worst of all, they are making the rest of us nearly as cynical as professional Democrats already are. That's a high cost. Molly Hemingway is a senior editor at The Federalist, and she joins us tonight. So, Ice Cube Gate. Is this one of those moments that, looking back on it 15 years from now, we're going to cringe in embarrassment that adults with college degrees could have taken something like this seriously?
I would hope that we look back on this and cringe in embarrassment. I'm worried that this is the direction that things are going, and that this type of attack will be used to discredit anyone that the media feels is a political enemy. And what you've seen, I mean, yes, Icegate is a ridiculous story, and I want to clarify, the claim is that he may or may not have thrown ice, which is even more ridiculous than that he might have thrown ice.
Right.
And to make this be a big explosive expose is ridiculous, but all of them have been kind of increasingly ridiculous, and none of them have had supporting evidence. And so this is a very dangerous path to go down, and I'm worried that unless people really take a strong stand against this type of reporting and against this type of media campaign where you just throw as many stories out there as possible, never mind the fact that they are uncorroborated, unsubstantiated, or patently ridiculous, that they will continue in the future.
So, but this is an asymmetrical event. So on the one side, you have people who are willing to do anything and lie about it. The Washington Post, for example, a purely political operation funded by the world's richest man, writes stories for their political effect. That's the point. And yet Republicans are playing by a set of rules devised in the 18th century, and they're very literal. Well, there's a story, we must take it seriously. At what point do Republicans say, you know what, this is a lie, I know the game, I get the joke, I'm not playing along?
Right. There's a difference between joining with them in a very bad game where you attack people based on what they did in high school and otherwise. But also, that doesn't mean that you have to put up with it or go along with it or treat these things as sane, even. I mean, a lot of these allegations never should have been promulgated by the media to begin with. People are saying, oh, well, we put this person on air so we can all see that she's ridiculous. Well, that's true. You can see that some of these allegations are ridiculous when you show light on them. But there should be a basic standard. I mean, this is a human being who is being torn apart through this process. And then also, even if they're acknowledging that some of the stories are ridiculous, at the same time, they're putting forth stories that are ridiculous on their own. And so there's just a lot of problems overall.
So why, I mean, final quick question, but why does it fall to Lindsey Graham, of all people, to be the only member of the United States Senate to say that out loud? Are there no other members who feel an obligation to protect their voters from false charges and to protect the country from falling into some kind of mob rule situation, which it is?
I think there's a very frustrating moment for a lot of people of goodwill, whether they're left or right. They see what's going on. They know it's wrong. And yet so many people who they expect to be leaders in Washington, D.C. or otherwise are behaving as if what's going on is completely acceptable.
Yes.
More people than Lindsey Graham should be standing up and saying, halt the madness. This is insane. This is a real family. This is a real man. And this is a real country that has standards, and we are not living up to those
Normal
standards.
people would like to be protected from this stuff. They're exposed and in danger, and their representatives don't seem to care. Molly, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Senator Jeff Flake said he was going to vote one way, then he was screamed at in an elevator by a protester and immediately changed his opinion. So that works, and that's why other lawmakers are now being targeted by protesters. Guess who's funding them? We'll tell you. You probably already know. Plus, the president is speaking tonight in Mississippi. We're monitoring that speech, of course. If news breaks, we'll be there immediately.
Top in his class at Yale Law School. He's led like a life that's unbelievable. He's had no problems. They've never taken him out of restaurants. They've never done. This is like a person that everybody thought at the highest level on both sides. They said someday he will be a Supreme Court judge.
Senator Jeff Flake of Arizona announced initially he planned to vote yes for Brett Kavanaugh, and then he was confronted by two protesters in an elevator in the Senate. That was on tape. There it is. One of the women who was screaming at him, it turns out, is a professional activist on the payroll of billionaire George Soros. Her name is Anna Maria Archila. She's co-executive director at the Center for Popular Democracy, which Soros funds. Another protester who harassed Senators Mitch McConnell and Bob Corker also, amazingly, works for that group. Congressman Jim Jordan is a Republican. He represents the state of Ohio. He sits on the House Judiciary Committee, and we're happy to have him tonight. Congressman, are you surprised to learn this?
No, I mean, the left is going completely crazy. I mean, you think about this. They applaud Kaepernick and they try to destroy Judge Kavanaugh. That's the modern day left. So it doesn't really surprise me. I said this the other day to a group I was addressing, that they applaud Kaepernick when he disrespects the flag. They embrace Cuomo when he said America was never that great. And they cheer on Maxine Waters when she encourages people to go harass Republicans, like what happened to Senator Flake. So this is just the left. And I think Americans see through this, and that's why so many folks across our district, and frankly, I was in Texas last week, I think around the country, want Judge Kavanaugh to be on the court and know he deserves to be on the court.
It's just a little weird to see this from a nonprofit in Washington. I mean, you think of nonprofit organizations in D.C. as producing backgrounders, helping formulate policy. It's impossible to imagine the Heritage Foundation saying to two employees, high-level ones, hey, go to National Airport and scream at Mazie Hirono as she gets in her Uber. I mean, Republicans just... So is that a legitimate use of a nonprofit?
Well, I don't think so, but that's the left today. I mean, my wife and I got what I call the treatment. 2 days after Maxine Waters, clear back in June, said, go harass people who support the president, we got the treatment at the theater here in town. So, look, you and I would never do that to someone at a restaurant, at some public event, but the left now thinks that's appropriate because, look, again, they applaud Kaepernick, they attack and try to destroy Kavanaugh. That is the left today. And frankly, as we head into this campaign, I think that is how we should frame this up. Here's the left and all their craziness, and then look at the record under President Trump's leadership in the last 20 months, how amazing that is. Frame it up like that. If we do that, I think we can win. Think about the lowest unemployment in 20 years, 4.2% growth rate, taxes have been cut, regulations reduced, Kavanaugh going on the court, Gorsuch already there. We're out of that crazy Iran deal. The embassies in Jerusalem and hostages have been returned from North Korea. Contrast those up, I think we can win, particularly when you demonstrate here is what the radical left is up to in this country. That is what this election's about, and I hope that's the message we take across the country.
So very quick, for those of us who worry that this is accelerating into a really scary place, has anyone ever thought about going over to Maxine Waters' office and saying, you know, I get that we disagree, but please don't encourage physical confrontation or violence because, you know, that's dangerous?
No, I don't know if that's been done, but I appreciate liberals who come from a different perspective. I was good friends when he was here in Congress. Dennis Kucinich, a friend of mine, and we agreed on so many First Amendment issues, Fourth Amendment, Bill of Rights issues, civil liberties. We could work together, but now the left, they don't seem to be where Dennis was, and he and I could work together on things.
I agree.
That is a scary thing for this country, and I know you know that, and that's why it's so important that you keep talking about this like you have been.
Congressman Jim Jordan of Ohio, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Dana Perino is the person we talk to when we want to understand the political ramifications of all this. Obviously, she hosts the Daily Briefing every day at 2, and she's the star of the 5, the singular one, I would say, but that's just my view.
Thank you for
what
having
is
me.
the political effect of the Kavanaugh saga?
As the president likes to say, we'll see what happens. It is really high stakes, and everybody is super engaged. They were sort of like waiting, like, what would be the October surprise? Well, I think that actually the Kavanaugh is it. For Republicans, they could benefit in certain places. For example, in the states like North Dakota, you see Heidi Heitkamp now down 10 to her Republican challenger. That's really big, and it's going to be hard for her to come back from that. Also Missouri, Indiana, and West Virginia. But it could help Democrats in House seats and also some gubernatorial seats. And it might help them where races are really tight in Senate races like New Jersey and Florida, maybe Nevada and Arizona. So I think from that perspective, we don't know. There are, I think, 3 Democratic sets of parties that are going to, I think, call it the Kavanaugh blast zone.
Yes.
And they're not happy about it. The first ones would be the red state Democrats who face voters in 5 weeks. Those are those people like Heidi Heitkamp, I mentioned, Joe Manchin, Joe Donnelly. All of them are in states where the polling shows that Republicans strongly support the president, they strongly support Judge Kavanaugh, and that one of the #1 reasons they went to vote in 2016 was the Supreme Court. Then the second one would be the 2020 Democratic senators who want to run for president, but they're not on the Judiciary Committee. Right now, Kamala Harris and Cory Booker are having all the fun. And people like Elizabeth Warren, she has to figure out a way to stay in the news. So this past weekend, she said, by the way, I might run for president, after just 3 weeks ago saying, of course I'm not going to run for president. So they're trying to figure out how to get in there. But the biggest loser probably will be Joe Biden, who actually arguably could be one of their best candidates against Donald Trump in 2020, but because of this, and if you go back to the Anita Hill hearings, he's going to have such a hill to overcome that they might have just shot him in the foot.
Interesting. So, but you think if it hadn't been for this, he would have been a legitimate contender?
Well, I think timing is everything. And, of course, you could say there's all these improbabilities for why. But, one, name ID is super important. And he has the highest name ID of any Democrat. He's certainly testing the waters to see if he could run. And he's got energy, and he wants to fight against Trump. And he's one of those Democrats that might be able to bring back some of those blue-collar workers that you write about in your great new book, Ship of Fools, that you won't promote on your own show.
Well, you put a bow on that sentence. I thought Joe Biden had a shot in 1988, so he might be one of these perpetual...
Well, that's why President Trump calls him the 1% Joe.
That's pretty funny. Dana, great to see you. Thank you.
Thanks for having me.
The ACLU used to stand up for, indeed stand for civil liberties. They're the ones who reminded us that due process is the most important thing. Not anymore. They say they know for certain Kavanaugh is guilty, no trial necessary. What happened to them? We'll tell you next. Plus, the president is speaking in Mississippi tonight. We're monitoring his speech in case news occurs, in which case we will be there in a flash. That's our promise. Stay tuned.
Took him off the trash heap, right? Biden, I hear Biden wants to take me to the back of a barn. He would be in big trouble, I will tell
you. Here we go. Well, the conflagration over Judge Brett Kavanaugh is quickly growing out of control. It's turning into a wildfire that threatens its own creators because, as you know, the revolution always consumes the people who started it. Case in point, Senate challenger Beto O'Rourke, who's running against Ted Cruz in Texas, is now apologizing, groveling in a craven way for what misdeed? Well, it turns out he wrote a musical review at the age of 19 for the Columbia student newspaper. He was known as Robert then. He was fresh out of boarding school. In that piece, he says this, that the Will Rogers Folly had actresses who were chosen, quote, for their phenomenally large breasts and tight buttocks, end quote. So he's obviously evil. We'd ignore this whole thing as dumb and irrelevant, but that would be a mistake. It says somewhere in the Constitution, we just learned, by the way, I think on MSNBC, that dumb college essays categorically disqualify you from serving in the U.S. Senate. At the very minimum, we ought to have an FBI investigation to see if O'Rourke, I don't know, ever admitted to not liking Toni Morrison novels. Maybe 2 FBI investigations, because we need to know. Well, the ACLU has been around a long time, and it built its reputation defending free speech and especially due process, especially for the politically unpopular. It saved lives at the beginning of its existence. That was the whole point of the ACLU. Those traditional principles are being washed away, though, in the tide of derangement that has now seized the left, and the ACLU has decided to join that tide. They are now running an ad declaring Kavanaugh guilty without the need for a trial or, in fact, any evidence. Watch.
We've seen this before, denials from powerful men.
I did not have sexual relations with that woman.
I've never seen anything like this.
I categorically and unequivocally deny the allegation against me by Dr. Ford.
America is watching, and as we choose a lifetime seat on our highest court, integrity matters, and we cannot have any doubt. Senator Gardner, oppose the confirmation of Judge Kavanaugh.
Chris Hahn is a radio show host, former aide to Senator Chuck Schumer, probably a donor to the ACLU, and he joins us tonight. Chris, it's great to see you. So you're, pushing late middle age like I am. You've been around long enough to remember what the ACLU has been doing for the past...
Late?
Whatever, unless, you're probably over 30.
Middle age.
Middle age. But you've watched the ACLU over time, and you know they were founded to defend free speech and due process, civil liberties. And yet here they just ran an ad suggesting a man is guilty on the basis of no evidence because he shares some resemblance to 2 other guys who are probably guilty. That's guilt by association. It's the opposite of due process. Why is the ACLU doing this, I wonder?
Well, they're not declaring him guilty. In fact, I don't think anybody's trying to declare him guilty. What we're trying to do is pick a Supreme Court justice, and guilt or innocence really not the issue here. He's not on trial for his life. He's applying for a job. We've got to ask the question, has he been truthful in that inquiry? And the answer is no, I would say. I don't know for sure about the sexual assault allegation, although I do believe Dr. Ford. But I do know that some of the things he talked about last Thursday,
hold on. I'm sorry,
he was not forthcoming about.
Okay, so before we get to what you think he specifically lied about, I just want to rewind a second to what you said, because it strikes me as amazing. You're saying that without finding someone guilty of anything, it's okay to destroy his reputation to the point where he can't get paying work and can't get the job that he was nominated for by the President of the United States. No, I'm serious. He just had to withdraw as a lecturer at Harvard because his reputation has been so sullied. He hasn't been found guilty of anything. There's no actual evidence to show he did anything. But that's okay with you because we're not in a trial? Is that what you're saying? That's the new standard?
What I'm saying is, you got to ask the question, is this man fit for a lifetime appointment that will never, ever face the voters, will never face Congress again? And if you feel in your heart that this man may have committed this thing or he hasn't been truthful to that committee, which I will tell you, I don't believe he was truthful to the committee.
I just want to get, he lied, but that's unprovable, so it's not even worth debating on TV, I would say. But to the first point, the standard is if you feel in your heart. So if I feel in my heart that you're a child molester, I don't have any actual evidence. Can I start telling people that on TV and see how it affects your family and how it affects your employment, what your kids think of it? Well, no, but if I feel in my heart, like sincerely feel in my heart.
I'm not trying to get a lifetime appointment on the bench, and nobody's accusing him of anything that somebody did not come forward credibly accuse him.
Well,
he was credibly accused of something.
But hold on. He's been accused of a lot of things. Credibly is a subjective term. Is it okay if you, quote, feel in your heart that someone's guilty to systematically destroy him and his family? And you're saying yes because it's so important because abortion or whatever. But is that really a standard you want to live under?
Did you find Dr. Ford credible?
I'm not really sure. She wasn't asked real questions. Like, for example, when did you recall this? Have you known it for 30 years and not said it to one person and then told your therapist about it? That's the basic question. Nobody asked it because they're too afraid.
You're smart enough to know that traumatic experiences, sometimes you only remember the trauma.
I don't know what I know.
I don't know what I know.
That's why I ask real questions on my show. I'm not bullied into silence by a bunch of activists.
And I think you found her credible, too. But in addition to that, he lied about little things. He lied about what the Renata alumni was. He lied about what the Ralph Club was. He lied to Congress.
You're saying he lied about the Ralph Club? Over. Done. I agree. Look, you lie about the Ralph Club, and you're done. I feel that in my heart, let me just say. This is so crazy.
Look,
I'm saving
you gotta
this
be
tape.
Truthful.
All right, okay. Especially about the Ralph Club.
Why lie about it, though? My thing, Tucker, is why lie about that? It was something he could have just said, I was a dumb kid, and I did, we Ralphed when we drank.
I'm going to let you have the last word.
Prank. He could have just said that. Instead, he lied.
Okay. With the last word on the Ralph Club, Chris Hahn, thank you very much. This is a Fox News alert. We promised to monitor the ongoing Trump rally in Mississippi for some news, and we have some. The president addressed the Brett Kavanaugh confirmation about 5 minutes ago. We spoke about Christine Ford, NBC, and the creepy porn lawyer at the center of a lot of this. Here's what he said.
How did you get home? I don't remember. How'd you get there? I don't remember. Where is the place? I don't remember. How many years ago was it? I don't know. I don't know. What neighborhood was it in? I don't know. Where's the house? I don't know. Upstairs, downstairs, where was it? I don't know. But I had one beer. That's the only thing I remember. And a man's life is in tatters. A man's life is shattered. We had another woman just reported by a sleazebag lawyer named Aviate. Sleazebag. Sleazebag. It turned out, even NBC, who's as bad as they get, even NBC couldn't shield her with that interview. Did you see that interview? This woman had no clue what was going on.
That was the president just minutes ago. We'll continue to monitor the rally if more news emerges. And we'll have an update on that Georgetown professor, Christine Fair, who says people with a certain skin color should be murdered, castrated, and fed to animals. But it's cool because free speech. The only person guaranteed free speech on campus is calling for killing over at Georgetown. We've got details. Georgetown University professor Christine Fair is a lunatic and a hater, but she's become the face of the Trump resistance. In response to the Kavanaugh hearings, Fair tweeted that white men on the Senate Judiciary Committee should be killed. They should be castrated and their bodies fed to pigs. Not making that up. Read the tweet. It's on the screen. Georgetown University was asked about this. They didn't care. She apparently is the only person at Georgetown with free speech rights. Twitter has suspended her account briefly. Hassan Rahmani is a former Georgetown professor. Fair once publicly denounced her as a Nazi enabler for voting for Donald Trump. Hassan Rahmani joins us tonight. What do you make of this? Were you surprised? I've never really seen anything like this. These aren't political opinions. They're a summons to violence and mutilation. Were you surprised?
Well, I've long known for the last 2 years, since Election Day 2016, that she was, part of this extremist left that sadly has found new power in America. I confronted her on her own smears against me, and she felt like she had a self-righteous indignation that she was allowed to express all of this. What particularly disturbed me about her latest attack is that she's an expert on South Asia, and she knows that this is exactly what the Afghan Taliban did to a former president of Afghanistan named Najibullah. They castrated him, they hung him so that they could terrorize the people of Afghanistan. And so for me, what she is tweeting is not just a simple, single, troubling remark, but part of this larger dynamic that we faced over the last 2 years that I considered an extremist, alt-left insurgency in America that is trying to topple this government with any means necessary. And we see it from this bird dogging, strategy that they've got, cornering senators and congressmen in the elevators. This has been 2 years in the making, and I didn't get to hear your earlier segment, but all of the players here are the same ones that marched on the day after President Trump's inauguration. They were all funded by the Open Society Foundation, as you mentioned, by billionaire George Soros, who unfortunately couldn't get his candidate, Hillary Clinton, into office. And so for the last 2 years, they have been empowered time and time again to try to topple our government by any means necessary, and this is disturbing.
So you're describing an activist group using radical means to achieve political ends. I buy that completely. What baffles me is why long-standing institutions like Georgetown University, which has a lot of alumni and reasonable people who work there, or the Washington Post, which wrote a piece defending Professor Fair tonight, why are they defending calls to violence all of a sudden?
It's unbelievable. I mean, it's this double standard that anybody who agrees with you and is inside your tribe is okay, no matter what they say. But if somebody is outside your tribe, then they are fair game to take down. And so, last week, I was here at the Capitol from midnight to try to get a seat at the hearing because I wanted to decide for myself who was telling the truth, what was the reality. Well, I was number 3 in line, and, I couldn't get a seat because they had all been given away. One of which was given to the actress, that was sitting behind Judge Kavanaugh. What we face today are people who are going into these hearing rooms, people who are going into our democracy with not the idea of civil society that we had always hoped would run our country, but an insurgency. And that is so disturbing to me and distressing.
Ooh, your words are distressing to me because I know they are true. Professor, thanks a lot for joining us today. I appreciate it. I hope you'll come back.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for taking the time to try to bring people into balance.
Of course. We are for balance. Yeah. Victor Davis Hanson is one of the smartest people we know. He's a senior fellow at the Hoover Institution, and he joins us tonight. You're one of the few guests. I would just ask, what's your assessment of what is happening right now tonight?
Well, I think that with all these incidents of professors saying certain things and asymmetrical treatment toward them, we're starting to see that if you're conservative and you are zealous in expression about the Kavanaugh hearings, it's a window into your dark soul. If you're progressive, it's proof of your zealousness for righteous indignation. But it's illustrative, Tucker, that the values of the campus are no longer esoteric or irrelevant. They've been transmogrified right into the Congress.
Exactly.
Right into the heart of American governance. We saw at Yale or Berkeley students rush Professor Christakis at Yale, but now we're seeing the same thing with Jeff Flake. Lindsey Graham said he felt it was dangerous to walk to the Senate. And we're starting to see Cory Booker, I couldn't believe it. He said, "I believe your truth," to Dr. Ford. And I thought, wait a minute, there is one truth that we find through cross-examination, witnesses, testimonies. They're not just equal narratives, but that's exactly what the university preaches in postmodern English department, that there's a variety of truths and you can pick which one you want and they become valid depending on access to power, race, class, or gender. We still have, and we have the same idea of prolonged adolescence where we have these 18, 19, and 20-year-olds that we invent things like microaggressions, trigger warnings, safe space so they won't be hurt. These are people whose great-grandfathers were dying in places like Guadalcanal and Okinawa at 18, and yet now in the Congress we're not supposed to be too aggressive in cross-examination, or we don't want to pursue certain lines of examination because we've confused the entire idea of being sincere with being credible. Dr. Ford was sincere and she was empathetic, but that did not translate into being credible. Credibility is established by evidence, cross-examination, testimony, and the messy process of cross-examination. And it's not established by considering the accused guilty or relying on hearsay or not knowing any of the key details that might adjudicate who is telling the truth or not. So the campus is in the Congress, and that's a scary idea.
So let me say very quickly, this is almost a rhetorical question, but conservatives have fought for 40 years to lower the marginal tax rates. I think that's a virtuous thing to work toward. But they spent almost no time at all trying to reclaim college campuses for education. Should they have?
Yeah, I think they should have. I think that when they give money, and a lot of very wealthy people give money to the universities, they should target that donation. The worst thing you can do is throw gasoline onto a fire by getting your name on a building and not knowing how your money is going to be spent. Yeah. We need to look at a lot of medieval practices, from tenure to the admissions processes, which are not transparent. And it's a protected institution. It's time that we put a little light on it and see if it follows the practices of due process.
It's time to nail 95 theses to the front door of Harvard. I totally agree with that. Professor, thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Senator John Kennedy of Louisiana says that he is fed up with what he sees as a witch hunt against Brett Kavanaugh. He joins us next to explain.
This entire thing makes me want to heave. If you think this is about searching for the truth, you ought to put down the bong.
For free.
Because self-awareness as a category has totally disappeared from the earth, like the dinosaurs, this happened today. America's best-known dismisser of sexual misconduct allegations weighed in, of course, on the Brett Kavanaugh saga to remind us we need to believe all women. While appearing at the Atlantic Festival, Hillary Clinton said that now that the allegations are less credible and don't involve her husband, she's okay with just believing accusers and ditching the account of anyone else. Watch.
Women and young women and girls are saying, you have to hear our stories too. They've been historically dismissed, condescended to, picked apart, second-guessed, held to a double standard. And at some point, it just is time to say, enough.
Though there's a guy who says he's a journalist sitting next to her, you can be certain that no meaningful follow-up questions were asked, of course. Hillary Clinton also went on to say that Kavanaugh became too angry after being accused of gang rape, and therefore he shouldn't sit on the Supreme Court. Watch.
I mean, really. I thought it was just part of the whole of his very defensive and unconvincing presentation. But I think for anyone who believes there's such a thing as a judicial temperament and that we want judges, particularly those on our highest court, to approach issues, approach plaintiffs and defendants with a sense of fairness, that there's a lot to be concerned about.
I mean, it's totally Orwellian. But again, nobody noted that as she spoke. Senator John Kennedy of Louisiana, though, noticed it. Here's what he said.
This entire thing makes me want to heave. If you think this is about searching for the truth, you ought to put down the bong.
Senator Kennedy joins us tonight. Put down the bong. Do you think that there are people in the United States Senate, any people, who believe that this is on the level and that Democrats are acting in good faith as they were asked for this investigation?
I think there are some Democrats in good faith, but I think some of their colleagues, it isn't about searching for the truth. It's about winning. Just win, baby, win.
Yeah.
Doesn't matter who gets destroyed. And these are people, I'm not going to name names, but I'm not sure they have a soul. I don't think their mother breastfed them. I think they went right to raw meat. If Dr. Ford's in the way, destroy her. Breach her confidentiality, destroy her kids, destroy her family. Brett Kavanaugh's in the way, destroy him and his kids and his reputation. And then, after calling him a rich, drunk, lying sexual predator, they criticized him for defending himself. Now, having said that, I'm a lot more sanguine than some folks around here. I know the Democrats think they're winning, but, you know, sometimes falling feels like you're flying for a little while. I predict that Brett Kavanaugh will be confirmed. They think he's a smoked turkey. You watch. I think he'll be confirmed, and I think he'll be confirmed within the next week.
Are you alone in thinking that?
I think there's some who doubt that we're winning. I'm not one of them. I also think that the American people, despite the fact that many in Washington, D.C. believe they're much smarter than Americans, I think the American people, most mainstream Americans, see right through this. And I hope they're motivated enough to go vote. It's not going to change.
Right.
You can't fix stupid, but you can vote it out.
This is a complex topic, but I want your crisp summation of it because I think it's important. So you've introduced a new bill into Congress that targets banks that infringe on gun rights. Can you sum that up for our viewers?
Yes. My bill would say that the General Services Administration cannot do business on behalf of the American taxpayer with any bank that decides to discriminate against unlawful business on the basis of social policy. For example, Citigroup and Bank of America don't believe in the Second Amendment, and they've decided they won't do business with any businesses that sell automatic weapons, semi-automatic weapons, or handguns. Now, their copy of the Bill of Rights goes from 1 to 3. My copy includes the Second Amendment. And when they almost went broke in 2008 and the American taxpayer had to give Citigroup $475 billion and Bank of America $336 billion, I don't recall Citigroup or Bank of America saying, well, now wait, which of you believe in the Second Amendment? I don't want your money. They took everybody's money. So we don't need red banks or blue banks. We need safe banks. And I have a feeling that they have, if they think they have too much time on their hands, so they need to make social policy instead of Congress, then maybe they ought to look at their balance sheets.
It's hard to state how wonderful I think that is, and how glad I am to hear it. Finally, somebody. Senator, thanks so much. We're going to be watching that for sure.
Thanks,
Great to see you.
You too.
We've got a little bit of news right after the break. We hope you will stick with us. Till then, we'll be right back.
For free.
Because self-awareness as a category has totally disappeared from the earth, like the dinosaurs, this happened today. America's best-known dismisser of sexual misconduct allegations weighed in, of course, on the Brett Kavanaugh saga to remind us we need to believe all women. While appearing at the Atlantic Festival, Hillary Clinton said that now that the allegations are less credible and don't involve her husband, she's okay with just believing accusers and ditching the account of anyone else. Watch.
Women and young women and girls are saying, you have to hear our stories too. They've been historically dismissed, condescended to, picked apart, second-guessed, held to a double standard. And at some point, it just is time to say, enough.
Though there's a guy who says he's a journalist sitting next to her, you can be certain that no meaningful follow-up questions were asked. Of course. Hillary Clinton also went on to say that Kavanaugh became too angry after being accused of gang rape, and therefore he shouldn't sit on the Supreme Court. Watch.
I mean, really, I thought it was just part of the whole of his very defensive and unconvincing presentation. But I think for anyone who believes there's such a thing as a judicial temperament and that we want judges, particularly those on our highest court, to approach issues, approach plaintiffs and defendants with a sense of fairness, that there's a lot to be concerned about.
I mean, it's totally Orwellian. But again,